Welcome to yet another edition of COVID-19. I'm Min Sun-hee. 60% of the world's COVID-19 cases were reported last month. This is according to the World Health Organization, whose officials have also disclosed that during the past week, the number of new global infections surpassed 160,000 every single day. We begin the program now with more on the numbers with our Kwon So-ah and Kim Mo-gyun. First, then, let's turn to our Kwon So-ah for the latest on the pandemic here and elsewhere around the world. So-ah, do start us off with the domestic updates.
Well, Sunny, different from what we've been seeing lately, it's not the metropolitan region that had the highest number of local infections this Thursday, but these cases are now expanding to more and more corners of the country. So first, let's take a look at today's figures. We have 54 new cases as of 12 a.m., and that brings the total to 12,904, and the death toll remains at 282, and this has been the case since last Friday, so for almost a week now. And 938 people remain in quarantine or isolation, while 11,684 people have made a full recovery from the virus. And now for a look at the recent developments in daily increases. We have cases above 50 for the second consecutive day, as we have a rise from 51 to 54, and that as we have 44 new local infections and 10 imported cases. And the concern here is that out of the 44 cases, 22 were reported in the southwestern city of Gwangju, and followed by 13 in the capital Seoul and 10 in Gyeonggi-do province and 3 in Chungcheongnam-do province and Daegu each, and also 1 case in the city of Daejeon. And now on the global front, no slowing down in numbers here. As compared to our tally 24 hours ago, we have around 200,000 new cases, and that brings the total to 10.8 million, with almost 519,000 fatalities and 5.9 million recoveries. And one country that accounts for a large proportion of these new cases is the U.S., and that had its highest daily caseload on Wednesday, with almost over 52,000 cases, and California alone having 9,740 cases, and that brings the total to more than 2.77 million cases in the U.S. And Brazil's official death toll at 60,000 now, and India has a total infection of more than 605,000. So soon, this country is expected to surpass Russia. And meanwhile, in the past 24 hours, Mexico has become the country with the 10th highest total infections around the world, surpassing Iran, and also Pakistan had additional 4,000 cases, bringing the total to 213,470. And later on, Sunny is going to have an in-depth with a person in Pakistan, and also I'm going to be back here later after the government briefing. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, so thank you for that for now. Right, as part of its efforts to fight COVID-19, the government has submitted a third supplementary budget proposal worth nearly $30 billion to the National Assembly. Now, lawmakers are reviewing this record-breaking budget, hoping to pass it by Friday. For more on this, I have our National Assembly correspondent, Kim Mo-gyun, here in the studio. Welcome, Mo-gyun.
Good afternoon.
Right, let's start by breaking down this latest government budget proposal.
Sure. The government's third extra budget proposal, worth roughly $30 billion is the biggest single extra budget from the government in South Korean history. This is the first time in 48 years that South Korea drew up a third extra budget in one calendar year, and it is the sixth supplementary budget overall under the Moon administration. Much of it will be used to buffer against the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic, and more than $7.3 billion have been set aside to stabilize the job market by supporting irregular workers and the unemployed, while some $4 billion will be used to subsidize small businesses and local companies in hard-hit industries. The budget will also be used to strengthen the social safety net for low-income and vulnerable segments of the population.
Now, Mo-gyun, you mentioned the government injecting money to cope with existing problems, but I hear the budget will also cover more future-oriented goals.
Yes, in fact, Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun himself highlighted that the third budget will also act as a stepping stone to support the country's future economic growth. Let's take a listen.
This extra budget has been drawn up to help our citizens suffering from COVID-19 by strengthening quarantine measures and building a platform that could help our economy recover through the Korean version of the New Deal.
And in line with that vision, nearly $700 million of the budget have been allocated for the Digital New Deal initiative, which is aimed at strengthening data, networks, and artificial intelligence infrastructures. $15 million will be injected in research and development of COVID-19 vaccines, and another $18 million to create a Korean quarantine system that could be useful in managing future pandemics.
Which is all good, of course, but considering the fact that this is already the third extra budget this year alone, how is the government planning to come up with the money?
Well, like you've mentioned, this is the third extra budget of the government this year. The first was $9.6 billion in March, and the second was $10 billion in April. And despite those efforts, it decided to submit a rare third proposal given the deep and wide-ranging impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as for ways to finance the budget, the government plans to issue $19.8 billion in state bonds while revising its spending plan in other areas.
All right, Mo-kyun, can you tell us a bit about some of the practical changes that we can expect following the passage of the third budget proposal?
Well, to be more specific, more than 1 million freelancers and non-regular workers will be able to receive around $1,250, while some 400,000 unemployed will receive the same amount in jobless benefits. The government will guarantee jobs, and some 580,000 employees who work for companies facing financial difficulties, and 550,000 new jobs will be created through the budget. And given the urgency of the situation, the government plans to implement 75% of the budget within 3 months from when it receives a green light from the parliament.
And speaking about the parliament, how is the situation unfolding there right now?
Well, for nearly a month, rival parties were at odds over the distribution of standing committee chairs that will make up the 21st National Assembly. So they weren't actually able to proceed with the reviews. And President Moon Jae-in even called on the parliament to swiftly pass the bill, stressing its urgency in helping the public's livelihoods.
코로나로 인한 국민들의 경제적 고통을 국회가 더는 외면하지 않으리라 믿습니다. 3차 추경을 간절히 기다리는 국민들과 기업들의 절실한 요구에 국회가 응답해 주실 것을 다시 한번 간곡히 당부드립니다.
So earlier this week, the ruling Democratic Party, which holds the majority of seats in the new parliament, together with National Assembly Speaker Park Byung-seok, decided to push forward in electing the chairs despite resistance from the main opposition United Future Party. So the standing committees have been reviewing the budget without opposition lawmakers for the past few days. And on Tuesday, lawmakers handed over their revised budget, which is up $2.6 billion from the government proposal to the Budget Coordination Committee for detailed screening. And once finished, this will then be handed over to the Finance Ministry for them to fill out the budget statement, which will then be put up for a full floor vote at the plenary session of the parliament. And now, despite continuing boycott and opposition from the United Future Party, the ruling party still plans to push through with the plan and pass the final extra budget at before the June extraordinary session ends.
I see. All right, Mo-kyun, thank you for those details. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Right, up next, we join the regular afternoon briefing on COVID-19 here in Korea. As the number of new infections hits above 50 for the second day, authorities have renewed calls for vigilance and for efforts to abide by safety practices, including the wearing of face masks, the avoiding of crowded and confined spaces, and sticking, that is, to personal hygiene practices. Health officials are also strongly recommending that religious services be held online. Also in related news, while beaches across the country have opened for the summer, visitors are expected to abide to strict disinfection and social distancing rules. Now, these include a 2-meter distance between beach umbrellas, restrictions on the use of shower boots, and wearing a face mask when not in the water. The briefing is about to start, so we will come back to you afterwards.
First, here is Deputy Director Kwon Jun-wook with the briefing. Let us now begin our regular briefing for July 2nd, Thursday, on the COVID-19 response here in South Korea. As of today midnight, we have 44 new local infections, and the total number of confirmed cases now also includes 10 new imported cases and now stands at 12,904. A total of 71 more people have been discharged and 938 people are still in quarantine undergoing treatment. The death toll remains unchanged from yesterday. Here are some detailed updates on domestic infections. Related to Wangsong Church in Gwanak-gu District, Seoul City, we have one additional case being confirmed. In total, we have 33 cases being confirmed to date. And also in Gwanak-gu District, we have a family whose all family members of 7 people have been confirmed. And also this family member includes an elementary school student at Gwanak-gu District. So we are conducting the epidemiological investigation for 198 students and faculty at that school. And we have additional cases being confirmed at an apartment complex in Ujeongbu City, Gyeonggi-do Province. And we have also continued infections at a health gym that the person visited, and a total of 14 people have been tested positive. And in Daejeon Cheondong Elementary School, we had 2 previous cases being confirmed. They are students, and we have conducted the diagnostic testings for 308 students and faculty members, and we have no additional case as of yet. And related to the Gwangnuksa Temple in Gwangju City, we also have new cluster infection at a Gumyang building. And therefore, we are looking at the cases and tracing contacts of the church and the business establishments, which is a nursing hospital. And we have 30 new cases now, and a total now stands at 49 cases. And so here are some updates of the table for each of the venues, and they are included in the press kit. Here are the updates on the 10 imported new cases, 2 from Americas and 8 from Asia, excluding China, and Kazakhstan, Pakistan each had 2 people. And as of 6 p.m. July 1st, we have intensified our entry screening at seaports, and we have 154 ports embarking at 11 ports nationwide, and we have conducted our onboard quarantine measures, and we continue to do so. And here are some updates on our R&D research progress. And as for plasma treatment donations, we have additional of 40 people who showed intentions to donate their blood plasma, and a total of 269 people have agreed to donate their plasma treatment. And out of them, 109 people have already donated their plasma treatments. For plasma samples for treatments, and currently at 5 hospitals nationwide, out of the 18 the patients, 18 people have been receiving the plasmas from the treated people, and we also administered remdesivir, and starting from today at around 3 p.m. we will be administering remdesivir to the patients who have requested for this treatment. Moreover, we are also conducting our surveys on the analysis of some 1,500 data of the clinical data of the treated people, and a total of 8 institutions have asked for these results, and 5 of them are public clinic hospitals, and 2 are institutions, and 1 is a school. So we are conducting the progress. And the KCDC, we have recently witnessed cluster infections in the religious facilities, especially through small group meetings. So we continue to ask you to refrain from social gatherings and small religious group meetings and switch to non-face-to-face meets. And even though you have to inevitably have the physical services, please refrain from any droplet-inducing activities, including singing and chanting, and more specifically, we ask you only to play the music. And also, in between these services, please refrain from having small group meetings, as these are venues that is prone to infections with high droplet traveling in the air. And looking at the latest outbreak here in the country, we are seeing an increase in the proportion of metropolitan area and non-metropolitan area as well. And also we have over 10% of the cases which are unidentified sources of infection. And also like this, the sources of infection which were clustered in the metropolitan area is now spreading nationwide, even to Daejeon and Gwangju regions through many small business gatherings like the door-to-door sales. And COVID-19 spreads especially at crowded, close contact environments, so please take particular precaution. And we ask you to refrain or cancel and postpone all of your small gatherings, and please do not go to any public use facilities, including door-to-door facilities, PC rooms, and singing rooms, and so forth. Last but not least, in relation to COVID-19, we have a final message to the public. Domestically here in the country, we are witnessing a trend of the COVID-19 spreading through non-metropolitan areas like Daejeon and Gwangju cities. So these chains of transmissions are spreading across the country. Please remember that we are also witnessing a large travel among the country, and that means that any cities or any provinces could be prone to the infection. What's fortunate is that we are seeing a less and minimized outbreak at facilities that abide well by the quarantine protocols. And we have also very good role models of religious facilities that have kept really good abidance and compliance with the quarantine protocols. And always, please wear your face masks, and if you go to these places of worship, and please sit in zigzag format so you have a distance with each other. And instead of singing together and chanting together, please play the music only, and also refrain from consuming food and dining together. And also, aside from the large gatherings, there are also religious facilities that have refrained from small group gatherings, and these facilities were where we did not have a massive outbreak of the COVID-19 infections. And we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to all of the facilities and religious facilities for your participation in the quarantine protocol. And also please note that there are a lot of the epidemiological investigators who are working around the clock, and they are also seeing that the restaurants are also very much prone to the infection, especially because people do not wear face masks when they are eating together. However, at restaurants, when you eat by yourselves alone without talking to others, and if you have to make a phone call in between your eating, please refrain from talking inside the venue, but please step outdoors to talk on the phone. And please note that conversations without wearing a face mask or your phone conversations could also increase the respiratory droplets to travel in mid-air. And as we mentioned multiple times, COVID-19 is something that we cannot avoid. However, it is something that we should adopt to. And in between our business briefings, we will continue to update the public on our recommendations and latest developments. And these information will be shared with the public on a very swift manner. And on the other hand, we will also share the model cases so that they could be shared around the country. And we ask the public to continue to participate in practicing our quarantine protocols. And despite the fact that we are living in an era of COVID-19, please remember that we are trying to intensify communication with the public. Thank you very much.
Right, that was Kwon Jun-uk, the Vice Head of KCDC, with Thursday's afternoon briefing. Soa, do give us a summary of the key announcements.
All right, Kwon mentioned how the latest trend has been changing a little bit when it comes to infections here in Korea, which means from large facilities to smaller facilities and gatherings, and from the metropolitan region to the entire country. So that's been the trend we're seeing, and that is also why the Vice Chief of the KCDC mentioned for the fourth straight day, in fact, the KCDC's afternoon briefers have been mentioning religious gatherings and asked for people to abide by quarantine measures and try to go for alternatives such as non-contact services. And also there has been an update on the Daejeon Elementary School, a school in Daejeon where there were a couple of students infected recently. More than 300 people are being tested for that case. That includes students and faculty members, and so far it looks that no one additionally tested positive. Meanwhile, there have been also more cases linked to other sporadic cluster infections related to churches and even an apartment in Gyeonggi-do province. So we will have to be vigilant for these smaller gatherings. And also, Kwon mentioned very specific details on how to act at restaurants. And one thing that was notable is that when you're at restaurants eating, even alone, and you're on the phone, you should try to be careful on your phone conversations and try to maybe go out and not do that at the restaurant.
I see. All right, so thank you for that. We'll see you again tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Meanwhile, university students and schools continue to lock horns over tuition refunds, with the former taking issue with class suspensions, campus closures and remote learning. We have more on this universal dispute in this next report.
Rallies are being held in university campuses around the nation, with students demanding a refund on their tuition.
학교본부는 20년도 1학기에 발생한 학생들의 전반적인 학습권 침해의 사실을 인정하고 이를 배상하기 위한 등록금 일부 환급을 요구한다.
The majority of university students here in Korea agree that tuition should be refunded. The controversy first began after universities around the country began holding virtual lectures amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
저희가 제공받으려고 했었던 기대 수준의 강의 질이 있을 텐데 온라인 강의가 진행되면서, 그리고 뿐만 아니라 온라인 강의가 준비되지 않은 상황 속에서 진행되면서 발생한 교육권 손실이 주된 이유여서 그에 대한 합당한 등록금 보상을 요구하고 있는 중입니다.
3,500 students from 42 universities have filed a class action lawsuit in hopes of getting their money back.
대면 수업으로 달성할 수 있는 목적을 사실은 온라인 수업으로는 달성할 수 없기 때문에 그 부분에 대해서는 대학의 채무 불이행 책임을 물을 수 있을 것으로 보이고, 그리고 각종 실험 실습 이런 것들이 다 진행이 불가능하게 되었기 때문에 실험 실습비, 시설 이용료 이런 부분들에 대해서는 부당이득으로 대학에 반환 청구를 할 수 있을 것으로 보입니다.
However, many universities are opposing this idea, saying they've made significant investments to deliver quality education through virtual learning.
LMS 서버 확충을 위한 비용이라든가 아니면 이제 클라우드 확충 아니면 이제 그 온라인 교육으로 인한 회선 확충 등등 해서 많은 비용이 발생을 하고 있고, 또한 온라인 교육을 하기 위한 시스템들이 각 대학들이 미비하다 보니까 이를 위한 준비들로 많은 비용들이 오히려 더 추가가 되고 있다고 보시면 됩니다.
University students in the US, the UK, and elsewhere are also seeking refunds on their tuition after campuses were shut down due to COVID-19. Harvard University, Brown University, and other institutions have decided to return a portion of the tuition back to the students. One university in Seoul decided to grant a scholarship of 200,000 won, or approximately $166 to each of its 6,500 students.
이번 코로나로 인해서 이제 쓸 수 없는 돈들이 있습니다. 예컨대 해외 현장 실습이나 해외 봉사활동 또는 파견 이런 예산들이 있는데 그것을 최대한 조정해서 약 14억 1천만 원을 마련하게 되었습니다.
With controversy still reigning over the issue, the Korean government has decided to provide indirect support measures to universities that come up with a concrete plan to tackle the issue. University students and faculty members are caught in an intense tug-of-war over tuition refunds, necessitating a fair and realistic solution amid the COVID-19 outbreak here in Korea.
Elsewhere in the world, Pakistan has the second highest number of COVID-19 cases in South Asia, just after India. As of early July, Pakistan has recorded more than 200,000 infections. For more on the situation there, I have Asad Hashim, a correspondent for Al Jazeera, who is currently in Islamabad. Hello, Asad.
Hi, Sunny. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Asad, let's begin with the COVID-19 outbreak in Pakistan. Some observers believe the actual number of infections could be higher than 200,000.
Yeah, the situation in Pakistan is quite serious. Officially, there are about 217,000 cases as of today across this country of 220 million people. But cases are not really an accurate guide in this case because testing is so limited. In fact, over the last 10 days, we've seen a drastic drop in daily testing numbers down to around 20,000 tests per day. That's compared to the 50,000 tests per day that the World Health Organization says that Pakistan needs to do in order to gauge the true prevalence of the virus. So the short answer is we don't really know how bad things are at the moment. But a better guide of how serious a country's coronavirus pandemic is, or epidemic is by deaths. And on that front, Pakistan has been doing relatively better than many European countries or other countries that were hardest hit by the epidemic. So far, we've had about 4,500 deaths from the coronavirus in Pakistan so far, with a case fatality rate of about 2.1%. That's far, far below what we've seen in European countries of around 13.9%, I think, in the UK currently, and even higher in some other European countries. So even so, we do have a problem here because Pakistan's hospital capacity is quite limited. And what we're seeing is that the wards that have been allocated for COVID-19 patients in major cities in particular, those are beginning to overflow and they're beginning to turn away patients who need critical care and ICU care. So that's usually also a bad indicator that things are going south.
Asad, what do you believe has led to the alarming spread of the virus in Pakistan?
Look, cases began to spread in Pakistan around about early May. This coincides with, late May, which coincides with when the government lifted many restrictions and lockdown restrictions across the country ahead of the Eid al-Fitr holiday. At that time, it essentially opened up almost all markets and businesses and allowed business as usual to function and put the onus on citizens to maintain social distancing. At the time, the government said that they needed to do this in order to keep the economy moving because Pakistan, obviously, with more than 30% of its population under the poverty line, felt that it couldn't sustain a sustained lockdown. Now, what we saw from that was an explosion in cases. And right now, the government says that there is capacity in the healthcare system. But cases are concentrated in these urban centers. And in those areas, we're seeing patients, as I said, being turned away. So the immediate issue right now seems to be one of healthcare capacity. And what the government is doing right now is trying to fill those, increase the allocation in government hospitals and also to increase healthcare facilities that can handle COVID-19 patients. They are also maintaining some forms of lockdown, something called a smart lockdown, which I'll talk about in a second. But, essentially, they need to find a way to curb the spread because even though we're not seeing that many deaths, the virus at this point is essentially vastly prevalent in society.
I see. Asad, I suppose the smart lockdown, was it? Or the smart approach is what you're going to talk about. That is the way that the government there is seeking to better perhaps contain the virus?
That's right. So the smart lockdown situation is what the government kind of rolled out following their lifting of the lockdown restrictions in late May. And so a smart lockdown, according to Pakistani parlance, is where instead of shutting down entire cities or regions, they're shutting down specific neighborhoods and localities in cities where there is a high rate of infection. We've seen mixed results with this. It does definitely work in terms of bringing down the rate of infection in those areas because those areas essentially go under almost complete curfew. Everything is shut down there. And so with people not really interacting with each other, the infections have gone down. But there is a manpower problem, and the manpower problem is quite serious. And I've had government officials admit to me that, if they have 5,000 hotspots that they would like to do the smart lockdown in, they just don't have the people to do it in every single one of those places. So they're having to prioritize, and that obviously means that some infection hotspots are being allowed to run rampant. So it's not a complete solution at the moment.
Right. And given the current circumstances there are countries looking to restrict travel from Pakistan. How are officials there looking to address such restrictions imposed upon that country?
So this has been a very serious concern for the government. They felt when they reopened international traffic last month that they had actually made, a big step and big strides in terms of containing the spread of the virus, at least in terms of the international aviation system. But what we found is that almost immediately there were a lot of cases being reported amongst Pakistanis who were arriving at their destinations. And now, when a lot of carriers had resumed their flights, many of them have suspended them entirely. Some of them have now gone to a reduced schedule. So what the government says they're doing to address those concerns is to completely overhaul their screening system for passengers. They're now going to require that any international passengers have a negative COVID-19 test taken 72 hours, at least 72 hours before the flight itself. They're also going to be screening them more stringently at the airports. And so anybody who displays symptoms, even if they have a negative COVID-19 result, will not be allowed to board a plane. They're hoping this will address some of the concerns. But as of right now, it's actually quite difficult to get onto any flights into or out of Pakistan because carriers are just not willing to take the risk.
I see. All right, Asad, thank you very much for making the time to join us live at this hour with your thoughts.
Thanks very much.
일자리가 최고의 사회 안전망입니다. 정부는 고용 유지를 위한 강도 높은 지원책과 함께 위기 기업을 지원하고 보호하는 정책을 통해서도 일자리를 지키는 데 총력을 기울이고 있습니다.
Unemployment has become a universal challenge amid the pandemic, and governments across the world, including here in Korea, are seeking ways to create jobs. Now, to delve into this endeavor, I have Professor Yang Jun-sok from the Catholic University of Korea. Welcome, Professor Yang.
Hello.
And I also have Professor Che Sang-mi from Ewha Women's University. Good to see you again, Professor Che.
Good afternoon.
Now, Professor Yang, let's begin with the unemployment situation here in Korea. How severe is the crisis here?
Okay, well, the May unemployment rate was 4.5%. This was up 0.5 percentage point from April. 4.5% perhaps for people who are watching in Europe and United States may not seem that high, but this is the highest unemployment rate that we've seen in 20 years. And the employment rate, which is the proportion of the working age population divided by people who are actually working, is down 1.3% to 60.2%. But I think the really surprising numbers are actually behind these numbers in the small print. The number of economically inactive population has gone up a lot since April. And that's a combination of people who are too discouraged to find work and people who do not want to find work because, well, they're probably afraid of catching the coronavirus. And then another alarming number is people who are temporarily on leave. In April, this number was 1.5 million people. That's roughly equivalent to people who were unemployed in May. People who were unemployed in May was about 1.27 million people. So roughly about equal number of people in April was temporarily on leave. Unlike a lot of other advanced countries, Korea classifies these people as still being employed. So we're actually undercounting a lot of unemployment. Luckily, in May, this number, the temporarily on leave, fell to 1 million, but still, it is if we add these numbers onto the unemployment figures, then it'll come close to an 8-9%. And then Hyundai Economic Research Institute did a study. If the coronavirus lasts until end of this year, we may look to about additional 0.5 percentage point on the unemployment rate. If it lasts until end of next year, it'll probably add 1 percentage point to the unemployment rate.
And those are some very alarming numbers, of course.
For Korea, as I said, for people in the United States, they're used to higher numbers, so it may seem like a very good numbers to them. But for Korea, this is the worst numbers that we've seen in 20 years. And as I said, this really undercounts the unemployment compared to the U.S. standards, because in the U.S., temporarily on leave is counted as unemployed.
I see. Professor Che, I understand the plight, however, is ever more poignant for non-regular workers, as proven by a recent study.
According to the current survey done by civic organization, the results reveal that the people in the irregular jobs, such as part-timer, daily job basis, and freelancer, it's kind of in very special contract relationship. They experience 6 times more, unwanted the laying off compared to who are in the regular job area. The full-time job. But to understand this situation, we have to look at inside, the industry structure. As you know, recently, due to the coronavirus pandemic, that the service industry, they negatively influenced a lot compared to other industries such as the restaurant, entertainment industry, and travel industry. But if you look at employment types, those industry have relatively higher rate of those irregular job compared to other industry. That's why they also suffer this unemployment a lot compared to others.
I see. Professor Yang, in response to this reality, the government back in April, I think, disclosed a special job security plan. Tell us more about this initiative and your assessment of it.
Okay, well, the government committed to creating 550,000 jobs. There was a lot of criticism saying that this was temporary, this was in some ways unnecessary busy work, but I think one of the keys to combating the recession that's coming out of this coronavirus is to make sure that people have as many jobs as possible so that they have income, so that they can keep spending. If they can keep spending, keep the demand up, that means companies stay in business. And when companies stay in business, there's less job reduction, so the economy can struggle along. But if the jobs are not created, then it creates a bad feedback where you have less demand, less jobs, and it keeps repeating itself. So committing to create 550,000 jobs, even though it may be temporary, I think is a very good move. Government has also had some budget for direct payment to self-employed freelance workers. They would get 500,000 won per month for 3 months. Again, that's to keep up the income so that these people can keep spending, and it also has welfare effect as well, so they won't have to reduce their living standards too much. For workers who are paid on unpaid leave by employers, government will provide 1.5 million won per month for 3 months. So again, it's a combination of welfare policy and demand maintenance policy. And I think those, for the most part, are fairly good moves to make. There's also aid given to businesses where the government is asking that if the businesses get these aid, they commit to maintaining the jobs. They commit to not firing too many workers. And this is the type of move that we've seen in European countries, where European countries, rather than giving out money to everybody like the United States or Korea did, they're giving money to companies under the condition that this money is to be used for a part of wage payments to their workers so that they won't be fired.
Right. We take a moment now to hear from yet another expert on the issue of unemployment. We spoke to Sang-heon, the director of the Employment Policy Department at the International Labour Organization, and this is what he had to say with regard to the situation in Korea.
In the case of Korea, the situation is far better than in other countries because of Korea's very successful measures to contain the pandemic. But this is a relative thing. But when you look at the absolute term, the labor market disruptions are large in Korea. And the working hour losses in Korea are not much about the open unemployment. They are more about the working shorter hours and also moving out of the labor market, especially among the young people and also women. There is also high risk that the employment situation in Korea will get worse in the coming months unless the proactive and effective policies are in place very quickly. Current crisis requires taking simultaneous actions on the multiple fronts. First, actually, it is very, very important to boost the economy and also employment. This basically boils down to the issue of the fiscal stimulus. And the Korean government has done much on this, but we also believe that more can be done. Second, this stimulus package needs to be used to maximize employment outcome. I believe this actually job-centered approach is pretty much reflected in the current government policies. Third, despite our efforts to boost the economy and jobs, there will be many of them who actually will lose jobs and will suffer income losses. We need to protect them very, very effectively. The proposal for the universal employment insurance, as proposed by the government, is timely in this respect. But I really hope this new scheme will be implemented very quickly.
Right, Professor Che, as we heard, he's talking about government efforts to ensure some form of job security. What are your thoughts on the government's efforts so far?
Actually, governments try their best to maintain the national, spending, to maintain our economic situation in terms of like a more sound way. But as you know, this situation comes from outer factors, so it's very hard to, maintain our economic status in a sound way. So which means the near future, coming months, there will be a lot of difficulty. But if I look at the policy the governments try to employ it on, they try to support various kind of group, not only the people who lost job, but looking for the groups who are looking for new jobs, like younger people. So that's why they try to create 550,000 jobs, and then even though it's not very quality job, and also they focus on the people like. In the blinded spot, like the freelancers and a part-timer, they also get some benefits from their, the policy. That's what I thought.
Right. Professor Yang, the government has also set aside emergency funds. You touched upon it earlier, the emergency funds of about 500 billion won to ease the financial burden of those who've lost their jobs in light of COVID-19. How effective do you suppose this financial support would be for the unemployed?
Okay, well, the amount that's being given out, the 500,000 won for 3 months, or 1.5 million won for 3 months. That'll be, I think, significant help, but it will not completely replace lost income. But on the other hand, Korea does have limited amount of funds that it can work with. So given that, I would give it a B for effort. But the Korea spending on the employment programs right now is unprecedented. It actually was unprecedented even before the coronavirus, because government had put in a lot of money to create jobs for over 60s and younger people in their 20s. So in a sense, the plans that they are using now is an expansion of that policies to freelancers and part-time workers. But whether it'll be effective, well, what I'm worried about is that it's good that we're doing this now, because the demand, otherwise demand will go too down, and that will get us into a serious recession, even a depression. But once the economy recovers, will we maintain these same type of programs? Because I think if these type of programs continue on to a situation where things are normalized, then I think we may have a large distortion in the labor market.
Right. Professor Che, President Moon Jae-in, meanwhile, has spoken about broadening the country's employment insurance system to cover the entire economically active population. What are your thoughts on this plan?
Actually, in the same page, the same line, recently governments have created the relief fund, crisis relief fund, to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. In that perspective, providing all that fund to those of group that covered by insurance, employee insurance, we can expect some positive result. However, if you look at the long-term perspective, even though that current employment insurance only cover 50% of our all workforce in Korea, but still, a small business owner, they are optional to be in the system right now, because they can choose be in the system or they don't want to, So if the governments force them to in the system, it's also government need to think about where and how matching the financial resources for them, that's one of things tackle out to provide all the security, the security, society safety net to those people.
Right. Professor Yang, simply put, we need money to come across to make all these efforts possible. Can Korea handle the fiscal burden of all these measures?
Okay, well, IMF published some interesting statistics a few weeks ago. If we look at the government fiscal balance and the government debt for world as a whole, then the fiscal balance for this year will be minus 13.9%. That's 10 percentage points higher than it was last year. The total government debt will rise by 18.7 percentage point to 101.5%. So this is sort of an average of all the major countries. In Korea, the government deficit will only be 3.6% this year. And the government debt will only rise to 53.4% this year. So given that the average amount of global debt by country is about over 100%, 53.4% doesn't sound that bad. Now, a lot of Korean economists are worried because of the demographics, we're sure to have increasing deficits, increasing debt in the future. But for now, this means that we do have some room to work with. And when you have to spend the money, you have to spend the money. Because we don't spend this money, we get into a deeper depression, then it'll cost us even more to get out of it. But what we have to worry about is after the coronavirus is over, we have to reduce at least some of this debt burden. And the way to do that, I think, is to raise the GDP growth rate. So we really need to look at our productivity increasing policies after the coronavirus is under control.
All right. Now, although I'd like to continue with this discussion, we have a time limit here. So, Professor Yang, as always, thank you for your thoughts. And Professor Che, as always, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Right, that brings us to the end of Thursday's edition. Do join us again tomorrow as we look at the growing spread, that is, of the virus here and elsewhere around the world, and efforts aimed at containing it. In the meantime, do reach out to us with your thoughts and inquiries on our social media accounts or homepage, arirang.com. Thank you for watching.